Hi, I'm Gus Farrat.
And I'm Dave Hager.
Thanks for joining us on Trib Live here at the Clemente Museum, where we talk about huddling up with us and getting to know people's stories about how sports shapes their lives. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on Huddle Up with Gus Farrat here at the Great Clemente Museum. Today, our guest is Rocky Bleier, the Rocky Bleier. Thank you for coming on and joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, for having me. Nice to meet.
Yeah, so Rock, this is Dave. So,
right.
You can't really tell them apart.
Over here.
Right. So now we're going to get in the huddle with Rocky. We're going to start peppering him with some questions and here's some great stories maybe you've never heard before. So, Rock, this show is all about how sports and shaped your life as you were growing up. And so one of the questions we like to start was, who was that influential person from the time you can remember of playing sports that really developed your love for the game?
I think the love for the game, it just happens. You start playing, how does it start? So it really was my next door neighbor, Paul Schreider. And Paul's father also owned a bar. So there's two bars together. So we grew up together, went to grade school together and so on. And because of that, we were neighbors. And so we'd always play. I mean, we'd play catch, we'd play basketball, and he would help organize. I mean, I can remember our first organized team. We were in the fourth grade at the time. And so Paul was the one that pulled together. So it was Joey Bowers, so it was Paul Schreider. Then my brother-in-law, who Paul Reckner is his name, and so Puxy, that was his nickname. So Puxy, he was in the second grade, so we brought him. And the reason is because he had a basketball. And a pretty good court, so that was one.
Yeah.
So
he's a nice guy, too. He had a basketball.
But it was like growing up. So you grew up in the Midwest, and I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and so in the 50s, and it was a period of time where the neighborhood was the neighborhood, and you just you had pickup teams. You played in the backyard. You played against one another, and there wasn't Little League. It didn't exist at the time. Yeah. Babe Ruth did not exist at the time. No organized sports except for the grade school. But by the time you got there, so in the fifth grade, sixth grade, did you start playing? Then by the ninth grade, you're out. Then a new high school came, and then when we went on. But it was all about the neighborhood and growing up in that regards.
So all the sports, I did the same thing, right? Yeah. We'd all, I'd go to my buddy's house, we get his bike, then we go to the next guy's house, get that guy, and then we go get the guy who had the ball, and then we go to the field. But so out of all the sports you played when you were young, right? Because even for me, football wasn't it because... And I played a lot of different sports.
Yeah, so and football. So when you're young, what you played? You played baseball. That was the biggest one. Or and then we played basketball because it was so easy just to get a couple guys together and you play horse and you play in the backyard, whatever that might be. Football. We didn't play really until the fifth grade. Fifth grade was the first time that I played organized football. And then I didn't play again until I was in eighth grade, which was fine. And then I went on to high school and then played in high school. So the importance of sports was something to do, but ultimately what you learned, as we look back now on it, are different skill sets that complement one another, no matter what the sports is. So when in today's society, where everybody's concentrating, you got to go to this camp, you're playing this, and you can only play one sport. You're going to play baseball, you're going to play football, you're going to play basketball, and if you can't do multiple sports, I think it's really an injustice to a young athlete, because I think that he really needs to be able to experience all those other sports that tie into one another: eye-hand coordination, the ability to dribble a basketball, the hitting of a football.
Well, even from a burnout standpoint, you get burned out.
Oh, that's sport. Right. Yeah. And so all you got to do is, so if you just concentrate on one sport, you're going to get burned out. You got to have some change. You're right. So
I can still remember one of my favorite things was my dad gave me a broom handle. And he brought a piece of big felt home, and he said, "Just tape it up. That'll be your ball." And I'm like, "What?" And literally, we went out in my backyard, and that's what we used to play, because you could swing and hit it and feel like almost like but it wouldn't go as far, right?
Right.
It was a lot of fun, and we just. Yeah. But that's how my dad was a mill guy. I worked for PPG for 42 years,
right?
And we didn't have a lot of money, but you had to manufacture things to go out and play, and we did it all the time.
You know, and I think I think one of the experiences that you have was when you organize yourself amongst your peers. Well, somebody's got to take charge. Somebody's got to make a decision. How do you choose teams? You know, then you got to make up your own rules because you don't have enough people to cover everything. So it was like, okay, if you got 7 guys, so we got 3 on one side and 4 on the other. So you got a pitcher, you know, and the other team would catch for you.
Or lawn chair. That serves sometimes.
But when it's done for you, you know, you don't learn those skills of how to negotiate or what's who's going to make what team and what's out, what's not out, what's fair or not fair, and and so you can't hit to this field because we don't have anybody over there. So so it was all
It was like the shift back in the day, right? Like when you played, because we didn't have enough guys, so you're not allowed to hit it over there.
That's right. Or that neighbor won't give the ball back. So
don't go that way.
But and not to live in the past, and that's not what. But it makes you who you are. Or, it gives you a lot of skill sets that sometimes I think today, our young athletes don't have a chance to be able to hone and have experience in.
So you played baseball when you were younger.
Yeah.
Who did you have, like a team that you rooted for, or a favorite player?
So I got to go. So we go back into the 50s again, and the Milwaukee Braves were big. They had back in 56, 57. So we had Eddie Matthews was probably our favorite player on that team.
And a young Hank Aaron, he would have been.
Yeah.
He
So
would
he
have
was
been. He was probably a rookie in the early 50s.
Yeah, and so, and not that you would, you'd listen. My grandfather, so I'd stop over and see Grandpa and Grandma, and so he would sit on the porch and he'd have the radio. And he'd be listening to the Braves game. So you'd sit there and, how you doing, Gramps? Fine, you listen to part of it, and it was part of, part of getting to know your grandparents at the time. But those are memories that you have, and so that was it. And the Packers really didn't come into vogue until when Lombardi came in '58. 58, 59, 60 when they won their first. Championship, and then moved on, and people started getting excited. But not to say, well, here's an old guy, but television. We only had 3 channels, or 3 stations, I should say, and it closed down at midnight. And it was a regional game at 1:00 every Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
I kind of liked it better because I find myself always surfing like there's something better on, and there's like 1,000 channels now. Back then, you just watch what you watched. And
listening to baseball on the radio is still one of the greatest things. I love that whole feeling, listening to a game on the radio.
Right,
turn off the TV and listen to it on the radio.
And so, because it was all about the announcer, and how exciting he made the game seem at the time. And so
I grew up in Arizona, but we could, on a clear night, we could get LA Dodger games. So then Scully was. It was great though. You just
that would
sleep listening to Vince Scully.
That would be a good one.
Yeah.
So your dad was owned a bar. You guys, where'd you live?
So we lived there at the bar.
Okay.
So Dad bought the bar in 1945, and so I came the following year. In 1946, but the bar was an old inn, and there were rooms upstairs, and there was a kitchen and a living room and a bedroom, behind in the back of the bar, same building, but that's where we grew up, and ultimately by 1957 or so, they remodeled the upstairs, and so up until that point of time, I grew up with four guys that lived upstairs with us. I mean, had bedrooms upstairs. Right. So it was an old inn. It was a boarding room, and so, there was Joe and, God, who else was there? It was No, anyway, but so, you know, you don't think about it, but you go back and you go, okay, fine. There's one bathroom upstairs that everybody used.
Just one.
Just one, you know, and so the guys were, you know, that's where they but if they needed to.
You're including the bar patron still, like everyone.
No, sorry, yeah. So just upstairs, yeah.
So your mom had to get in there first because she'd never get it.
She did, that's right.
So did you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so I was the oldest of 4, and so I had 2 sisters and a brother, and so it was myself and then a sister and then a brother and then a sister, and so they all had, you know, and it's like we get back together now after all these years, and it's amazing just to listen to their experiences. Because they're completely different than my experiences, yours, right? You know, from how interactive with the patrons of the bar, growing up in the bar, and the interaction of mom and dad within that growth period. But
so
yeah, it was
did
great.
Your mom work in the bar?
Yeah,
as well?
so mom took care of. So she took care of all the books. I mean, she took all care of all the books. So we had so we served in this. So there was a kitchen. They served early. They served lunches, and then back in the Midwest. So it was fish fries were big on Fridays. You know, sure. So that was a staple. So fish fries, that was a big thing, and that lasted for about a year, okay? And then we closed the kitchen until we remodeled again. And then, as I had said, so we moved, we had an apartment upstairs, and then we started serving food on special nights. So Wednesday was a steak night, Friday was fish, obviously. Saturday was chicken night. So we had roasted chicken.
You knew you were working in the bar from the
Oh, so yeah.
Yeah.
So when we were young, we were back. So we had to bust the tables, you know, on those days, and then
it's free labor for you.
Free labor, yeah. And so. And then we had, you know, I had to do the dishes, you know, worked in the kitchen, you know, clean up and all that kind of stuff. Never bartended. I did once, and maybe that was the reason I never got into the bar.
So was your dad? Was your dad the kind of bartender that like marked the lines and made sure everybody had the same amount, or he just poured the drinks?
No, he just poured the drink.
That's good.
So dad's whole thing was basically, and his philosophy was, if I'm serving you a drink, I'm serving you a drink. So I pour the drink in front of you. You know, it's not on the back bar. You know, and I mix it here. I pour the beer in front of you, and so that you could see it was the presentation of that drink for you specifically there. And so
just for our audience, this is water.
This is water. Thank you. Yeah. Just make believe.
Even though we're talking a lot about bars, but so the other interesting thing that I read about the bar was how you got your nickname.
Oh yeah. So obviously, being the firstborn, Dad was a very proud father, as we all are for kids, and you know, and so the Appleton was a mill town, you know, much like Western Pennsylvania, a lot of towns that are here. Sure. It was a mill town. It was a paper town, a paper mill town. But, you know, guys would come in from the mill, and Dad be opened at 8 o'clock in the morning. He'd close at 1 o'clock at night. And so there were shifts that would come in, so the late night. And, you know, so they'd stop in, and they'd say, hey, Bob, how's that new kid of yours? Oh, Dad said, oh, you should see him, you know, very proud. You know, he's got all these little muscles. I mean, he looks like a little rock sitting in that crib. And so then they would come back, you know, and they say, hey, Bob, how's that little rock of yours? He said, well, what do you mean? You know, the kid that was, you know, and that's how I got it. So I was referred to as Rock, and I had that name ever since.
Could be worse, I guess.
Well, it could be. That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. He looks like a little blob in the crib.
That's
that
right.
Yeah. My nickname was Doughboy. For some reason, I don't know.
But anyway,
but was that a lot to live up to? Like everybody calling you Rocky, or was it just like?
No, it was just it. That was it. You know, it was kind of interesting because that was your name, so everybody called you Rocky. My real name is Robert Patrick. After my father, and was baptized on St. Patrick's Day. I was born March 5th. But nobody ever calls me Robert. So somebody, the only people that would call me Robert were the good nuns that taught me in grade school, and my mother. When things weren't going mad at you, right? That's right.
That's what we just talked about with Roberta. What did your mom call you when she was mad at you? The only time she would say Roberto was when she was mad. What did he say? Was I forget?
Well,
what the other.
Then she'd pinch him. And
he knew she was mad. She was, but we all said like our moms had they usually when they were mad at you called you by your real name.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, back in the huddle with Rocky. So Rock, we're gonna move on a little bit. Thanks for sharing your childhood. Want to go into high school because part of the show is talking about transitions that we all have to make in our life, right? And going from when you're young and then you're in middle school, then all of a sudden that transition to high school is tough, no matter where you live.
Right.
It's a difficult thing. And I'm sure that you were known around your area as a pretty good athlete. And how did that affect you going into high school?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. So here's the deal, which was that now we're going back to 1960. So we got the baby boomers moving into that high school realm. So new high schools were popping up all over. Right. In Appleton specifically, a new Catholic high school was built called Xavier High School. It was built in 58. So 59 was the first year, 60 we were they had freshmen and sophomores those 2 years. I came in as a freshman, and then they had 3 classes, and so by my sophomore year, it was a full-fledged 4-year school with a new conference that was developed. Now and so it was Christian Brothers. It was a Christian Brothers school, so it was new, and there was. And what was important about that was there was no legacy that you had to live up to because there wasn't any, you know. And so
easier to set records that way. Right?
That's right, or whatever. And nobody thought about records, And so I came as a freshman, and I tried out, and I played football on the freshman and on the JV team, and I played on the basketball team. But I also played in the band, and so coming out of St. Joe's Catholic grade school, I started playing the trumpet in the 4th grade, and so we played up through the 8th grade, and so it's just continuous. Mm-hmm. And so this was something new because band practice was after school, as football was after school or basketball was after school, and so all of a sudden there was a conflict. And it wasn't necessarily me, but a lot of athletes played in the band, as well. And so they were back and forth. Eventually, the following year, my sophomore year, they changed band to the first period, or 0 period. So you had to be at 7 o'clock. We had band practice so that we could play football. Sure. Now, the catalyst was the coach. Because I always believe, I'll get into that, but the catalyst was a coach, and it was a coach by the name of Torchy Clark, who came out of St. Mary's Catholic grade school. Right. And they were a dominant basketball team, and because of Torchy and his style and how he organized his team, and he would always win the Catholic League in grade school. Well, we finally won it over at St. Joe's when he left to go to high school, and so then we dominated one year and won it. But so we get over high school. Now you go to high school, you're a freshman. It's a new experience. How do you know what are you going to play or what's going to do or what you're going to turn out to be? You just go out and and you play, and basically if you're halfway coordinated, if you got some natural ability, that kind of comes through at that level, and so you get a chance to play. But what was interesting was that it also drew this Catholic high school from surrounding communities because it was a new Catholic high school. Right. And so all of a sudden there was a plethora of young talent that came in from other grade schools, that coalesced right here. And so during my period of time there, the conference years from sophomore, junior, and senior, is that we never lost a football game. We won the conference those 3 years, and they went after that 3 years. We lost 4 basketball games. Were the defending state champions in basketball during my junior year. My senior year, we lost the championship game, and so it was a hotbed. I mean, and it wasn't one person, was a lot of good, talented people coming together, and we had a coach that demanded and got the most out of all of his players, and depending on your experience, but really to this day, and for those who, if you ever talk to anybody that played during that period of time, will have nothing but great things to talk about Torchy Clark and the impact that he had on their lives, that allowed them to play. Now, and what was so good was that there wasn't a lot of guys that went on to play in college or football thereafter, but it was a great high school, experience, and a stepping stone for a lot of people, just from a business point of view. Anyway, so that was kind of what had taken place. So all of a sudden, you play, and so you become all conference, and then you get to be all state, and then you got to be on a high school All-American. It was the Parade magazine, and so it was a great distinction. But because of that, then you get recognized. And so so the thing about sports, and probably anything, is that, and I've always felt that there is always a catalyst. And what becomes important is that catalyst, that coach, because what he molds together are individuals into a team. And so it's the success of that team that gets you recognized. And, if we never won a football game, you might not, get recognized, for it. But all of a sudden, the team gets hot, and you're not losing, and and you're part of that, and you get recognized, and so then you get a chance to go to education.
Were your parents did they get involved in your high school athletics? Just besides going to the games, did they say, "Hey, we want you to play this or do this"?
No, because Dad ran a bar.
Yeah,
Dad ran a bar.
Were they able to watch your games, or?
They'd go. Yeah, okay. They'd go to the game. Yeah. They'd go to the games, and then even and then in college, they'd go to the game because after the games, most of the parents would come back to the bar.
Yeah. Did you remain in contact with Torchy as you got into the NFL and later?
Yeah, we did, and then he went down and started the basketball program at then Florida Tech, at Florida Tech, which now is Central Florida University.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so he started the basketball program, and I remember when he went down there and he started it, and they had no gym, they had no resources. They worked or they practiced at the Navy Reserve Center, because that was the closest basketball and so his practice uniforms were his game uniforms as well.
How'd they lure him down there? Hey, Torchy, we don't have any facilities yet, but we want you to be a coach. Come on down.
That was it. Well, I mean, because it was, he had the talent to be able to coach on the college level, and so, and then it was also kind of coach that he got a chance to do it his way and start a program over here. And so then they changed it. Florida Tech went to Central Florida University, and so the gym there, the basketball gym, is now named for him. It's the Torchy Clark gym. So
he's got one of the best names I think I've ever heard.
What a great name. Yeah. What was your favorite? What's your football experience? The one memory that you say, this is when I think about high school football, this is what I remember. Was it a play? Was it a game?
But no, it was so it was a game. It was my sophomore year, and we're playing Premontre out of Green Bay. Now Premontre was the dominant Catholic high school in the area at the time. So it was like Central Catholic here's to Pittsburgh, but it was the dominant. They won everything and so on and so on. So finally this upstart new school, Xavier, comes up, and we are playing up there pre-Montre, and it is the definitive game for that conference at the time, these two powers. And so we ultimately beat them. But in this case, as we were moving the ball down the field, and it was towards in the fourth quarter, so it was a quick pitch to me around the right side. Okay, so it was around the right side, and so I'm going down the sidelines. And I get hit, but I keep my balance.
Right.
Okay, and so there is a picture of me with my left foot inside the out of bounds line. My right foot never touched, but I was out of bounds, and controlled my body to come back.
It was the first instant replay picture.
That's right.
It's almost a Lynn Swan move there.
That's right. Yeah. And scored to win the game.
Wow.
And that was probably the definitive.
That's awesome. That would be a fun trip home. I
yeah.
bet that bus ride was fun with the guys.
It was, yeah, it was. Yeah, and everybody was excited that we won and beat Pre-Montre, and so that was a.
Do you still keep in contact with any of your former teammates or classmates?
Yes,
Xavier?
at Xavier, yeah. So there's a couple, over the years. We've said like Paul, Schreider, who he still lives there, and Kelly Cornelli, and Kip Whitlinger. No, Kip Whitlinger, he was we're talking about basketball. He was the dominant basketball player in that conference at that time. And we wouldn't have had the success if we hadn't, if we didn't have Kip.
Without Kip.
Yeah, without Kip. I mean, he was a 30-point guy a game, kind of. And
did he play in college then after that?
He went to Ohio State, and then unfortunately was in an automobile accident and got hurt that was the end of his career.
It's sad when stories cut short like that.
Right, yeah. But anyway, so he was a great tennis. He was a great tennis player, a great basketball player. His father played at Ohio State at the time, during the period of time when the underhand shots or the two-handed shots were in vogue at the time, and so Kip was following in his dad, and his dad, his dad made Kip practice every day. So when you talk about a parent influence on one's life, whether Kip wanted it or not, Dad was there and made him great.
So I know you went to Notre Dame, but did they come see you, or did other schools did everybody start sending you letters? How was that? Like, what was the first one you got? Who was the first letter you got?
The first contact was from University of Wisconsin. Okay, that they were were interested, obviously, since it was a state to come. Notre Dame, I got a letter from Notre Dame, and then I got a contact from Notre Dame, one of the scouts that were in that area. So actually, there was a gentleman in Appleton who his name was Russ Scal, okay, and Russ's dad owned a nightclub, which when nightclubs were big back there. It was a dinner club, it was a place where you went with a suit, a tie, and had a fine meal and so on. And Russ went to Notre Dame. Russ was a walk-on player at Notre Dame. And it changed his life as far as, not that he was a star, he wasn't a scholarship, but he was a walk-on. It was a part of this team. And so I remember it was my fall of my senior year. And he said, okay, Wisconsin's playing Notre Dame. And he said, so let's go down to the game. My dad and I left. We played Friday night. We left Saturday morning about 4:00 in the morning because it's about, and he wanted to get down there. He wanted to get down to campus so to have breakfast at one of the dining halls. And anyway, so it was about a 5-hour drive, to get down. So we got down there about 9:00 in the morning. Went over to see the coach at the time, and so I met the coach, and Huey DeVore was the coach. Was an interim coach at the time, and so Coach DeVore says, "Oh, hey, if you want to come here, we'll give you a scholarship to come to Notre Dame." And I'm still playing. I'm going, "Oh, that's very exciting," and so on. But anyway, then that was my first introduction to kind of like Notre Dame, and then I got after that senior year, and then more formal invite to come. But we got a brand new coach. Eric Parsegian comes in. So, whatever Huey DeVore said before
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter now.
Right.
So
that happens all the time.
Yeah. So I went to Wisconsin and so on. But I got letters from Big Ten schools like Illinois and Michigan and Minnesota. Not that any, they invited me to go on trips,
right.
But it was really the advice of, obviously, the scout or the coach from Notre Dame. And not that he was selling Notre Dame. All he was selling was the opportunity of going or having a chance to, I suppose, for me to select Notre Dame. But he said this. He said, "Now listen, you're going to get a lot of offers from schools, Division II, Division I, from around this, and every time you go visit one of these schools, they're going to roll out the red carpet and show you a good time and go through all this process. So when you go through this whole process and you got to make a decision, it's going to be more difficult when you have all these red carpets out there. How do you make the really different?" He said, "So why don't you pick 3 schools